you're an adjoining landowner who gets to speak, you have a 3-minute period in which you speak. If there's more than one person that lives in a residence, only one of you gets to speak, not everybody that lives in the house. And if you happen to have a cell phone with you this afternoon, most people do, make sure you turn it off now, because if it goes off during the meeting, we're going to ask you to leave the meeting. And I think that's it.
Okay, so,
Oh, excuse me. One more thing, when you come up to speak this evening, have a seat at this table up front here. And the first thing you need to tell us is your name and address. Thank you.
okay,
Sorry, go ahead.
all right. First item up is docket number 2024-01-PC, Nathan and Samantha Poindexter.
Hello, appreciate your time. My name's Nate Poindexter, this is my wife Samantha. I'm originally from this area, was actually born in Jeffersonville, grew up in the Charlestown, Otisco area.
Your address?
I'm sorry, current address 503 Seatick Road, Otisco, Indiana, 47163. Apologies. I'm sorry. We're here because we recently purchased about 9.5 acres out in Otisco off Old Highway 3. Unfortunately for us, we purchased the land with the purpose of building a single-family home. Unfortunately for us, there's a portion of the land that's zoned M1 manufacturing. So we're not looking to manufacture anything out there in the middle of the woods. We're just looking to build a house. So that's why we're here, to kindly ask for the zone change from the M1 manufacturing to agricultural designation so we can build a home. Thank you.
All right, is there anyone here to speak in favor for? Is there any? You can come up to the table, y'all can go back and take a seat.
Okay.
Thank you. Name and address, please.
Christine Morsley, 22417 Marysville, Indiana. I'm the property owner right across the street, and I have no problem with this. So, houses are good.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, okay, thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak for it? Is there anyone who would like to speak against it? If not, I'm going to close the public hearing. Does the board members have any questions or comments?
We pulled the original plat, Amy and I did. I think it was dated back in the 50s.
I don't know when it was dated from. I pulled the old paper zoning maps, just to confirm, and I don't know, again, when it was written down, those aren't well documented in that aspect, but.
It used to be a dump.
You know?
Dump written on it.
Yeah,
It's written down as dump, I was like, huh,
in the
okay.
very front, it goes back a certain amount, but yeah, we ran.
So that was why it was in Devon. That's true.
So, does anyone want to make a motion?
I make a motion to approve the change from the M1 to A.
Do I have a second? So I have a motion to approve docket number 2024-01-PC, changing the zone map from an M1 to an AG, and to send with a favorable recommendation to the county commissioners. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Okay, thank you. Legal, this is a short meeting.
Yes. We've been in two non-litigation enforcement procedures. One involved a person who was working a dumpster. What was the name of that AG dumpster service? The dump house? So they sent an enforcement letter. I have, has compliance occurred to your knowledge? Because as far as I know, I've received more phone calls than I think the
I'll talk to them later, but they'll have to come back to it.
And the second matter that we have gotten into is Lou and Line up on Star Ridge Road. We have started discussions with the owner and his attorney, and as I understand it from Amy, following a joint meeting where I was involved, I believe that the owner and his attorney are cooperating. We're trying to get to a resolved settlement of that case. They're going to be making some changes out there, and if they agree to it and actually pull that off, then we'll consider them in compliance. And those are the only two cases we've dealt with since the last meeting.
Thank you. Amy, discussion of possible UDO changes.
Yes, I've got some handouts for you guys. So I know we, frequently, at least annually, try to look at the UDO, see again, like any good ordinance, it needs to be living and not just static so that it becomes an issue. So as we've started to look at it, usually we just gotta keep enough of them until it makes sense to bring things to you, not bring it just one little bitty thing at a time. So the ones that we've got to we have to look through tonight, I've got 5 different ones on here to walk through real quick with you guys. Some are super easy, and some maybe, I guess, want to look for direction. So just a reminder, tonight we are not making decisions, we're not taking any action, it's not a public hearing. This is solely so that you all give me direction on what to actually draft up. Next month, then, we would hold a public hearing with a public notice, go through that process, and you have actual language at that point, but don't want to spend time doing it if you don't want to pursue that. So I'll run through these really quickly on your handout. The first one, topic number 1, is just the age of manufactured homes when they're placed. Currently, our ordinance says that they can be no older than 5 or 10 years when placed. Last legislative session, the state decided to take that one into their own hands, and they basically said that we are not allowed to, as local governments, regulate the age of a manufactured home when it is placed. So that first one is just aligning with Indiana code. So I'm assuming I can draft that one up for you guys. That was the easiest one. The second one actually came from some of the BZA members. This is looking at the minimum living area in the ag district, and you can tell me what districts if it's more. But basically, there have been a number, it's not like we're getting 20 or 30, but there have been a number of applications over the last couple of years that are smaller than the required 640 square feet of living area. And they all are getting approved without issue. So that starts to signify, I think, I'll look at Bart too, because I know you're on BZA, but it does start to signify, okay, if they're all getting approved and there's no issue, maybe we need to tweak our ordinance to adjust that. So my recommendation is just looking at the ag district in particular, but we can talk about others. I didn't necessarily use the word tiny home because that can mean a lot of different things in a lot of different people's minds. Right here, we would talk about minimum living area. So it's talking about still a permanent dwelling on a permanent foundation. It is not talking about a quote tiny home on a trailer. That is still yet a trailer, RV, that type of structure. So it's just saying, do we want to reduce it and or eliminate it? This is a trend nationally, going towards like affordable housing aspect and whatnot. It still would have to comply with state building code for a dwelling, so there are some requirements there. Again, needs to be affixed to a permanent foundation, so not something on wheels, that's, a trailer and a hitch and that sort of thing. So I guess I want some direction from you guys on that.
What do you suggest would be a minimum living area? Do you have a suggestion for us?
And I can't remember what some of the ones have come in at. Usually they're closer to 400. Again, Clarksville passed an ordinance recently for some I'll call them tiny homes because there's a lot of different images in how, in mine there. It's a smaller house. And it seems, I don't know if they really had things built off of it before, but I think at least they need to make sure it's large enough to pull a building permit first, and I think that's 240, is that correct, Jason, or 200? 200?
That's state code.
Yeah,
national code.
Okay.
I think some of the tiny home information I sent you was 265.
Yeah, and that's another, I think is, in my mind, once you're getting that small,
And those
you
things
have
are
at it if you wanna live
100,000.
there. High five for you. But that again, it has to have, meet state building code for a dwelling, so in my mind, that kind of is more of your determining factor than anything. But I don't necessarily have a recommendation on a minimum, only because if you wanna live small, have us, that's great. But it needs to at least be able to ensure that we pull building code, or building permits on it, so.
So what you're saying is Clarksville has set a precedent on that?
They were kind of like one of the first in the region, and I can see if I can pull that up really quickly, see what theirs was. They just were the first in the region to really head on and address this. It looks like, just at a quick Google, theirs was maybe 500. Which is not much less than ours. Pat on the back there. I would think that if you're gonna do it though, if you want to reduce it, I wouldn't go more than 400, because that seems to be what we typically are starting to get.
That's what the last one was.
It was 400, right?
That's what started the conversations. I believe they asked, the BZA asked if it could be an administrative change that we can do, but I don't know what the triggers would be to bring it in front of the board. I believe that's what we talked about in the last BZA. Just want to make it administrative. We need to know what triggers that would bring it back in front of the board.
And in that case, I would just say, if it's 400, whatever you pick, bring it back to the board as variance, you know what I mean? And you just, you don't have to have a minimum, no.
As long as, if the state has a minimum, then that's what we.
I think in that we would wanna specify in that amendment that it still requires a building permit,
Sure.
because.
Just
that's
like
the
a,
way
just
we're
like
gonna
a,
do it.
modular home, manufactured home would require a permit.
Yep.
But we're going off of the age for the state,
Mhm.
but based on what the state says.
Right, but I wanna specify it in there so no one
Okay.
thinks otherwise, I guess. So you guys just give you, it seems like maybe y'all aren't opposed to,
I'm of the opinion if you own a piece of property zoned agricultural, you're gonna have restrictive covenants.
if you're in a neighborhood.
You're not in a neighborhood,
Then-
it's your land. I feel like you should comply with the law and build what you want.
More power to
If
you.
you wanna build 100 square feet and live there, I'm not gonna tell you not to, it's your property. That's my opinion.
Okay, so if we go with no minimum, but we make some assurances in there, that,
Well, the minimum based off of state
you know,
regulation
okay, I'll,
or national.
All right, I'll research it.
the building code. Alright, that works. The third one then, is, it's probably more clarifying than anything else. So within our chapter 6 subdivision regulations, we have a couple of different sections in there. Within the road section, there are our general standards, which is where it is indirectly addressed, and then there are more as you kind of go down that section. And within our general standards, it gives us some discretion for the county engineer to give recommendations of best practices for access, right? So the idea is that we don't want curb cut onto a road that can't handle the traffic. We also have a section that specifically outlines it very clearly on collector and arterial roads. Just to make it clear, I think we should add a section under the arterial collector roads, add local roads to that header, and say that it's based on recommendations of the county engineer. Again, when we get like some plats out there that eventually they curb cut us up too much. I just was talking to Brian Dixon about one in the, Salisbury, Clarksville area, that is our road, it just is a mess, you know what I mean? So this would just draft some language that you guys would see next time to make it a little bit more clear and not as, ambiguous, if that's okay. Okay, next one then. This one is, was a good suggestion from Jason from going through and doing enforcement items out here. Currently we have a minimum length for driveways for just single family houses. So between whatever your building is, your garage and the sidewalk has to be 20 feet with the purpose of, you park the F-250 there and it doesn't hang out onto the road or onto the sidewalk. This was just more of a discussion, and when we were talking about amendments, we said, hey, we should at least mention it to them and see what you guys want to do or not. that what really happens is you can all double parked and they're still doing that. So it was just the discussion of, do you want to look at increasing that, and if you did, what would it do to your setbacks? That's, I would want to do the second part too, what would it do to your setbacks? Because I don't think we want to increase our setbacks necessarily. So we had that debate internally, and it was like, well, before we really flesh this out, let's see if you guys are even interested in this. It's still, didn't they make triple park? But just at least wanted to get guidance from you guys on that.
So that, have we thought about someone's garage as part of their driveway?
No, so right now the driveway length, and it's measured from the closest edge of that garage or facade, whatever it is, if they don't have a garage, to, it's either the back of the sidewalk, or edge of right of way if they don't have a sidewalk, like in the county or something, you know, where we don't have sidewalks out in the rural
Cause that
areas.
could affect their setback.
And that's what we said, we wanna make sure, we need to look at it in more detail on like the setbacks, cause I don't think we wanna increase setbacks, is my take. And I just wanna make sure we did something that doesn't mess with that. But,
I guess what brought this to my attention is, you know, we grow through these neighborhoods, we got requirements, not parking out on the street. We make developers put sidewalks in, we got cars blocking the sidewalks, people are walking in the streets, they're supposed to be on the sidewalks. And then we had cars that park out in the middle of the right of way. And we have a problem out here in Juniper Ridge, they park out in the middle of the right of way, there's 3 subdivisions using that one entrance, and they're in the middle of the road, and we got construction going on. So that's what made me look at the driveways, and it seems like there's a car's rear end's always parked on there. I was just thinking if it was 5 extra feet, that would free up our sidewalks and get our pedestrians back on the sidewalk where they're supposed to be, not out in the streets, because they can't walk around in our neighborhoods that we make them put sidewalks in. So that's what.
No, I would disagree with what you're saying.
yeah, I think it was a good observation from being out in the field and seeing how the issues it
I
really
mean, I
cause.
see it all the time.
Right.
So if you guys want, I can look at what it would do to the setbacks, I haven't looked at that yet. And especially our districts, because that's where it's gonna really apply. And see what we could get without making it increase the setback, if that makes sense.
Maybe look at some of the municipalities, City of Clarksville, Sellersburg.
Clarksville is 20, I believe, off the top of my head, unless I've changed it. Sellersburg is 20 as well, unless you guys have changed it. I don't know what Jeff is. Okay, I'm making that. Okay, so I'll bring something back to you guys to consider on that. And then the last one is, the longest one. It all relates to solar. So again, I think that we've had at least some more education and interaction and figuring out some of what these are. We also, when we went through the last round, in 2022, I believe it was, which is the last time I think we amended the ordinance. We also used Senate Bill 411, which was passed that year as a guidance on some of this. And so this, again, helps us to better understand the systems now, but it also starts to help to respond maybe even more with Senate Bill 411. Just to see, again, those aren't maybe necessarily always the shalls in that Senate bill, but it was basically the best guidance. It's the model ordinance kind of turned into somewhat of legislation to try to incentivize it by being a solar ready community. So I have 10 items here that I was gonna run through with you guys. There were a few other topics I can talk about at the end of this that were, discussed as in general, but weren't necessarily brought onto here because I think there were, again, some overarching, more concerns when we ran it through legal and a few other things like that. So I'll try to go through each one and jump in when you have thoughts or questions. So the first one's talking about conduit. So right now, all of our communication and power lines, they're already required to be underground. The only thing that can be above ground is from that point of basically where all of the solar converges, and then it goes to the interconnect, like the substation, the interconnect. So like those two little substations can be above ground, but everything else has to be underground. So this is just further specifying that it's underground, but it's in conduit. Like you're not just gonna bury that line. We currently just state that it has to meet all state and national building and electrical codes. So I don't know if that's duplicative, but that's one suggestion.
So Amy, that applies basically just to residential homes that have solar on.
No, sorry, and I should specify, this is all for commercial scale.
Okay.
This is only commercial scale, so we're not, and the way we define it in our ordinance, there's two levels of solar. There's solar, there's primary use is to make energy for on-site use. So your house, you put a solar panel up, you're also keeping that on site. If the new building that comes up here wants to put solar on their roof or next to it, that's for on-site use, that's fine as well. This is talking about solar farms, more or less, if that makes sense in your minds. So when we start to talk about, this is related to the commercial scale solar. Okay, so I'm not getting any, I'll put a check on that one to draft some language for you guys on that. The second is setbacks, and so, I know that was a big discussion, throughout the last number of months, and especially with some, again, other discussions, but there were a couple different setbacks to discuss with you guys if you're interested, get some feedback on it, and then I can draft some language if you guys wanna move forward. The first was non-participating property line. So a non-participating property is someone who's not in the solar, project. So right now, if it is a non-participating property line, they have to the solar field, any structures, any uses have to be set back, whatever that zoning district is. There's a caveat, if it's residential, we're gonna talk about it in the next one. So this is basically non-residential. If it is just solely ag, there's no house on that parcel. If it is industrial or commercial or, any of those uses. So increasing that from the base zone setback to 250 feet. I wanted to get some feedback on that one from you guys. Do you want me to run through like all three of these, or do you want me to just do one at a time? What's easiest? I'm gonna pull this up too.
What are you gonna do with it currently at? So what we-
Well, it's whatever the base zone district is, so, and it's gonna change on your front, side, and rear. You know what I mean? So like, and, I can pull up, let me go to the documents up here. So I'm not guessing. But, so, for instance. Most of these are gonna occur in ag. Okay, so let's just use that as an example. Right now your zone district, for that, your front yard setback is 30 feet, your side yard setback is 6, and your rear is 10. So that's, again, only if that adjacent parcel is not residential. So that's what this is kind of addressing at the moment with that. So that's, I guess, just one thought process on that. I don't think that's a bad thing. Again, it's trying to make sure that we're better aligned with maybe some of the industry practices that have come out from the state and from others. I'm gonna pull up the Senate Bill 411 that was enacted too. Most of their recommendations on setbacks started around 250 feet, which is where that came from then. Okay, that sounds good. The next two, I didn't necessarily put a setback on it because I wanted some feedback from you guys. Right now, we require 150-foot setback from any residential dwellings that are not part of the project. Again, the idea is corn is one thing, or industrial use is one thing, house is another thing. So increasing that distance, again, I think at a minimum, 250 is where we need to go, but we've heard a lot of feedback on wanting some more distance from that. Not necessarily, I mean, yes, there's aesthetics, but there's also just more concerns about having that as close to your house. If your house is built 6 foot off of the property line, can we get a little bit more space in between it? So that's really where that is coming from as well.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand the measurements. Isn't the 150 feet on the residential dwelling redundant from the 250 foot setback?
Now it would be, unless you made it more than 250.
Okay. Got it.
Yes. So again, there are some communities in the state that have gone even larger. And so, anywhere, I think maybe probably 1,000 is more of the biggest I've seen out there.
Yeah, that's cited here, I think Spencer County.
Yes. So that's probably on the higher end of those. And I think, again, that 250, if you keep 250, yes, A works for it then. But I think we've heard the feedback is to go larger than that. Again, 250 is in this, it was in the Senate Bill 411 as kind of that standard distance of setback. So we're at 150, so I think at a minimum or a low. So let's maybe think about increasing that a little bit to align with that, better align with the state's regulations or suggested regulations on this. But knowing it's also a residence, do you want to increase that even more? And we don't have to have an exact number tonight, but if you wanna go more, I can come back with some options, if you know what I mean? At least just guidance on that, we don't need to decide what it is tonight, we can do that next month with the public hearing, but.
This is only non-participating,
Yeah.
you're already gonna cover participating.
No, if you're participating, you
Put
sign
them
up.
where you want to put them.
So. Do you guys want me to look at something more than 250, like bring you some options and some examples?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That works. Just look at, again, wanna get guidance from you guys. And then the same thing is for creeks, ponds, waterways, and that sort of thing. Currently, we don't have a setback from those features. You referenced Spencer, yes, that is one. Richland, Indiana, which is in Spencer, also has, they have an ordinance. Again, some of the concerns in the past from others, like you're mentioning, are just, again, making sure that those, not even from what might be on the site, but a lot of the issues revolve around drainage. And we don't want erosion control and mud and all of that in those. So again, want to get direction if you guys want to do something, and should it be in that larger or that smaller range, just so we can start to draft some things. I think
I would be in the favoring larger
okay.
category.
Is there anything in the state, like with the core or, IDEM that requires because of the water?
So if it's like a regulated waterway, feel free to jump into, yes, you're gonna have to go through and get, they have maybe some setbacks, but it's not gonna be anything that we're really worried about here from
Okay.
this perspective and this scale. But they're not gonna let you build over or
No.
change that waterway or allow you to have sedimentation in that, you know what I mean, putting basically mud and dirt into it, but
There should be something for blue line streams.
yes, for blue lines. And it all should in theory go through drainage board, but again, erosion control is a concern to make sure that is good. So setbacks from creeks, ponds, and waterways. Okay, perfect. I'll look at that and something on that larger side too to bring you guys some options and examples. Okay, next is ground cover. So the suggestion, I think this is, again, maybe more clarification, because we say that you can't have any noxious or invasive species, which would include weeds, but it was more of specifying that and probably more just an average language, so we can add that maybe in parentheses or something saying including weeds, just to be very clear on that. And then the second half of that was also, we talked about pollinator meadows before, if you guys remember. Pollinator meadows look great, they have the pretty butterflies and all the flowers. And when we made the amendments back in 2022, the planning commission decided not to actually require pollinator meadows, which is in some of the states' guidance, because they're very hard to establish. They're hard to maintain properly without them becoming weeds. So we had it in there as that it just has to be required as ground cover, and it gives a couple suggestions, such as grass. One of those is pollinator meadows. So the suggestion was to remove that just so it doesn't maybe encourage it.
I realistically, I don't know how you would go out and enforce the violation of weeds.
For weeds,
Yeah, in agriculture, I mean,
it's overall gonna be difficult, I don't disagree.
maybe
I
a
think-
weed somebody may be a beautiful.
Great,
Plant
and
some
that's the thing with native species too, like,
Right.
a lot of people think they look like weeds, but they are not, they are a native species. I do know that those can't get too tall, cause it will mess their equipment up, so there is some of that at least. This was, again, it still wouldn't prohibit a pollinator meadow, it would just not suggest it.
Maybe we could talk about a maximum height of,
And the county has a weed ordinance for nuisances, correct, Connie? That's not ours from planning planning and zoning, that's a nuisance ordinance with the commissioners and Scott Lewis's section. So there's a weed ordinance out there.
I think the township enforces that. Trustee, I think.
They do in some areas, because we've got phone calls about it, and I've had to say you need to go to the trustee.
Yeah.
Okay,
But I
do you want to
don't know
put like
if
a
it's
max height? Is that what that's what you're saying? Like a,
See, in agriculture, man, I don't know.
it's ag.
It's ag.
Next guy's got them.
And if it's a solar farm, they're gonna need to control the height.
Correct, just from a functional standpoint,
Redundant, for a height limitation.
yeah. So you guys go, if we clarify that invasive and noxious species are weeds, and that we just strike pollinator meadow as a suggested type, it wouldn't prohibit it, but it would just be, okay. Alright, next one is noise and vibration, so I've kind of put these as one topic here. So this would add a reference to, Indiana code, it's 8-1-42-16, and that basically is based on this Senate Bill 411 that we've talked about. That's just the actual, when it got into the code. That would state we would wanna use it probably more verbatim, cause I know that when we talked with it, it was how do we enforce this? You're gonna have a decibel meter that goes out there and that sort of thing. So there is the enforcement and that side of it, that basically stating that the project owner has to demonstrate the system will operate in a way that doesn't exceed, and right now we've put 50, I put that in there, because that is what that statute that's referenced, it uses. And it's at the outer wall of an adjacent dwelling, so, that's the first part of it. Again, that's verbatim from the state statute to not, it's how do we enforce it, and we need to kind of talk through that if you guys are interested, not tonight, but we can work through that. And the second half of that is a similar requirement for our vibrations. So, I don't believe that the House bill had, vibrations in there. No, they didn't. So there wasn't necessarily a standard for that, but if you want to look at that, we can also add it in there. Again, I think we've talked internally, like staff level and David, the county would have to hire somebody to measure that. We cannot measure that. Jason doesn't have the equipment to go out there and measure vibrations at a certain distance. So that's more of the concern of making sure we can have a mechanism to enforce that, and that there might be costs associated with that. You wouldn't do it until there's an issue.
No other reason, we'll just put it in so that an applicant knows that's a requirement.
Correct, and then, it's kind of an aspect. So do you guys want me to draft something up on both of those?
I think so.
Okay, put the check mark next to it, my pen is closed. Alright, the next one is liability insurance. So, again, the county already requires within the decommissioning section of that project owner carry commercial liability insurance. Say somebody goes on there, gets hurt with, the county named as an additional insured. And we also require, basically a bond in case the equipment is there, the company leaves, and then the county has a lot of stuff to clean up. And to remediate that site back to its current state prior to the solar. One other, and I will say I was not even really aware of this, when we drafted our ordinance, and since working with some others, that there is an environmental insurance coverage too, and this was something that was brought forward to discuss if you guys want to make it a requirement for that. That's basically an insurance policy you buy through, your commercial insurance broker, that if there's an environmental issue that happens on the site, it's insurance to clean it up, to remediate that. And we can look at putting something of that level, or that in there, in addition to the commercial, the general liability, if somebody gets hurt, and the bonds to make sure we can actually claim that up if they do leave.
Yeah, I think at some point we need to state in there that if the company, that installs these, is leasing ground or owns the ground, at some point, if they do not succeed, then the liability insurance is gonna go back to the property owner somehow.
Yes, I think we have that covered, broadly again. We've got the ability, I think, within the bonds, the bonds to again, if something happens, that company leaves, yes, it is ultimately that property owner's responsibility, they signed on the dotted line. But we would also be able to call that bond in and actually clean the site, take all of that, remove it, you know, that sort of thing. Restore it back, they require, it's, 48 inches below soil, like foot below grade that they have to restore it.
Would
So
that be something we wanna have recorded on the deed?
we currently, I don't know, we can look at that, I don't know, because of the fact that it's, that bond in my mind, and I'll let David correct me if I'm wrong, that property owner necessarily couldn't use that, we would, you know what I mean? We would be the one that's named on that if it gets canceled or changed, we're noticed, so that we can actually cash it in. From that larger perspective, I don't know if we can.
I'm talking about if they don't hold up their end of the deal, and we go back on the property owner.
Yeah.
If something's recorded on that deed saying that, hey, we are responsible for it.
We do, so within the current ordinance, I see what you're saying, sorry about that. I'm gonna go to that section really quickly. So we currently require, it's not recorded on the deed, I believe, we do require every property owner to sign basically, I know what I'm getting into, like I'm liable,
Have it notarized.
yeah, let me see, I wanna read that to you, because I don't wanna say. I get trade standards here. Structure. Okay, so within that, part of their decommissioning plan, we require what we call an affidavit of responsibility. So it's signed and notarized affidavit that's recorded with the clerk. And it's provided by all property owners acknowledging that the responsibility of decommissioning, including the cost of decommission, is ultimately responsibility of the property owner, even if that responsibility and cost is assigned to the operator through a separate agreement. If the operator fails to comply with any aspect of the decommissioning plan, the property owner shall ultimately be responsible for all aspects and liable for all penalties for failure to comply. So I think we have that covered, already. This one is really just focused on that environmental insurance. So your general liability doesn't cover like environmental issues, like if the soil gets contaminated or something. And your doesn't cover that. That's just to get rid of the stuff if they don't get rid of it. This would cover environmental issues.
So if the county had to come in, it'd be in our benefit.
Well, or even if they were operating a cell and somehow got contaminated, the soil got contaminated or something of that nature, this is insurance so that we can make sure they have insurance coverage to clean that up.
I mean, that's really on them. If not.
Yeah, it is on them, but, I think the concern is that it becomes brownfield of some sort that is an issue then to redevelop. So, should I draft something up on that one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Number 6, so this is within the decommissioning plan, and this is one that really is probably more, when we drafted it, not seeing how onerous this was gonna be, but basically, right now, they get approved as a use, right? And then they have to get a development plan approved, but they also have to have their decommissioning plan approved, and that goes to the commissioners for approval. It outlines what needs to be in that decommissioning planning and everything. And right now, every 5 years, no matter what happens, they have to get that updated to make sure, again, we're staying with the times, right? We also say that if the project owner changes, or the project operator changes, they have to update that decommissioning plan. I think that is still a very good, solid idea. If somebody else buys it, then we wanna make sure they're on board for what we would need. That project owner, project operator, we also have in there that if any of the project property owners change, it has to be updated. So if Joe has a farm and part of his farm is being used for solar, part is not, and he gives it to his children or a child, right? That property owner changed. If Joe gets married, that property owner changed, possibly, puts him on the deed. And so taking the level of property owner off of there, because really that property owner is not doing anything with the solar per se, other than they signed that you can use my land. So, taking that off if that I think it's gonna bog you guys down, you're gonna be on every month. It's gonna look like something, so, is that okay? Okay, but we wanna keep the project owner and operator, for sure. The next one is
Let me
access.
stop you.
Oh, yes.
Maybe we put in some language that says that if there's a change in ownership, the operator has to at least supply us with some document that
Oh, I like
shows
that.
that the new owner has been,
That they've done this affidavit of responsibility and all that stuff.
they've
I
been
like
given a
that.
copy of this.
Okay, let me write it down.
I mean, if they had it recorded on the deed, wouldn't that go with whoever owned the property?
Yeah, but
In theory, but,
generally people don't really pay attention to the,
yeah, numerous of those.
they just walk away from the closing being told, you're the new owner. Thanks.
Who read every 98 lines of that sign on that? Okay, I do like that suggestion, David, I think that's a good one. So number 7 here is about access, so this is about adding a requirement, for a couple different levels here. So the idea is these are likely gonna be fenced facilities. The idea of a key, emergency key box or Knox box, that's a kind of normal thing, a lot of fire departments have those so that they can actually get in and not have to wait for somebody to actually get there hours later. So that's one half of it, and the other half of it, and this is based on some of the other communities and what was suggested, is also requiring equipment lockers, on that site. So if there's like a certain apparatus or equipment that those firefighters or EMS or whoever it is need, that it's already there on site. Again, that's up to you guys, to talk through if you want to require lockers and or some sort of.
I would ask for input from Tri-Township and Fire Department,
Or
what they want.
Gavin.
Yeah, I mean, I
They're the
don't
ones
think
that-
that's on the lockers and the Knox box.
Yes,
Both, okay. Do you want us to reach out to more than Tri-Township?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we can just email them all, some reply back.
I would ask Gavin Hebner.
Okay, that's a good one to go to
Yes,
first.
cause he's kind of over that, and I would think that they would want keys to be able to get in, because we do have fires.
Correct.
I mean, there could be anything, and they need to get in, they can't wait.
Correct, I think that definitely,
They
and I
would
wanna
go
know
for
if they
the
have a
fence if
need
they
for.
had to.
Yeah,
an
but
equipment
they
locker.
prefer not to.
Cause if they don't have a need for the equipment locker, then like, doesn't matter, if they're gonna keep it on their trucks anyway, then
Mhm.
so be it.
I would also like, if you're gonna ask them the question, ask them about what their thoughts on our distance from fire hydrants.
Like a required distance, make it a minimum. So the thing with that, we can, I can definitely do that,
Yeah.
but the issue's gonna become that most of our county does not have fire.
Fire hydrants.
Most of our, I'll rephrase it, most of our county within the unincorporated areas does not have fire hydrant access. And they don't have water lines that are large
And
enough
I
to
think if we
even
make
provide
it for them, then we would have to make it for all
Every-
everything, and it would be.
And a lot of that in the past, those discussions revolved around, you live in the county, yes, I understand that, I don't have fire hydrants. When they came to my house a year and a half ago, they had a pumper truck. But you're taking that liability on yourself by moving out with no fire hydrant access. So, if you want, I can look into it, but, it's gonna eliminate. We wanna make sure, again, with any use, no matter what the use is, we have to have a place that it could be home to, right? It might require an approval, a zoning change or something, but that might eliminate, all of our potential sites within the county. So, okay. I will talk to Gavin as my first stop, and if I'll go on his suggestion if he wants me to reach out to like Tri-Township. or-
Yeah, that was a question I'd ask
Yeah.
them.
I agree. I wanna know, like, do they need a locker? Cause if they would prefer not to leave it out there, then we don't need to make somebody put a locker in. Okay, number 8 is about fencing and wildlife corridors. So right now, we do not require fencing, but we do have some things on it. We just say that they can't do barbed wire or woven wire fence, like, you can't do those. We allow chain link, but we don't require a fence. from the sounds of it, most of these facilities are going to fence, cause it's in their best interest to not have kiddos or whoever else meandering around. So this would just put a requirement that they have to be fenced. That's the first half, I guess. Is that something that you guys want to look into? Okay, next, check it. And then the second thing is talking about wildlife corridors. And so we could require that if you're gonna fence in X number of acres, we can find a size based on maybe some DNR type of, language or, standards, that they would have to do some like wildlife corridors and or maybe a preserve area. This was suggested again, and if we're gonna have a big chunk fenced, we wanna make sure that all of the deer and everybody else can get around. That's up to you guys. I know when we discussed this, my only comment was I wanna make sure that we aren't focusing only on one use, and it might depend on the type of fence too. Again, like a horse fence, which would help keep people out, that's what most of our farmers use. Everybody can go right over under or through that one, like that's not an issue. But it's up to you guys if you want me to draft some language for you to look at.
I mean, it seems appropriate, again, specified number of acres being the variable, right?
Right. Should that apply just to solar, or do we wanna look at that on a larger scale too?
What do you mean?
Like other uses that might fence in?
Anything's gonna restrict wildlife from crossing through. There is no perfect remedy for this. You may keep someone out, but you're gonna keep wildlife
know.
from being able to.
The state's model is on the, it's wildlife friendly fencing, and basically has big holes in it.
They just have to know exactly where to go to find that corridor.
Correct. So I can look up some language if you guys are running on that corridor in the preserve area and or, and then you guys can at least yay or nay it. Okay. Last two, we're getting there. Signal interference. So, FAA regulates a lot of signal stuff in our world, and they are the authority on that. But this is adding a reference to Indiana Code 811-4215, and that is again part of that House or the Senate Bill 411 that came through in 2022. Just saying that it can't be that the system must be installed to minimize and mitigate impacts to television signals, microwave signals, agricultural GPS, military defense radar, radio reception, and weather Doppler radar. We don't currently require that. I think when we talked, it's already enforceable by others anyway, but it would just, I guess, outline what the state statute is on that and say it clearly for all to know. Okay. Last one we have here then is emergency response training. So this was something that was discussed a lot of during the last number of months. This would look at requiring that project owner to, we require them to have an emergency response plan right now. So like outlining like, okay, with access and the fire department can get in, get around the site or whatever it may be. Some communities require actual training, which is basically that project owner has Tri-Township or whoever it is, Gadsden, whoever, come on out on site so that they can know the lay of the land, basically. That's the first part of that. And the second part is the question on specialty equipment. And I'm thinking this is probably a Gavin question next.
Yeah, I would refer that.
Because is there specialty equipment? I have no idea. That may be needed for them. So I will talk to Gavin about that. And I'll even ask him about like visiting the site. Do they want to? I mean, I know they tell a lot of businesses, fire departments, they just they know how to get out and around. Okay, Gavin, question on that one. There were a couple others that we did discuss that I wanted to make sure that at least you knew we were discussing those or discussed them, but I didn't put on the list, unless you tell me, I guess, otherwise. But one was we had some suggestions on doing ongoing testing for air quality and like water sources and wells. Our kind of push on that is that we already have an air quality district who's measuring our air quality daily. If not, I don't even know if it's more than daily. And then any public water source well is already doing lots of testing under state requirements for my own. So those private wells don't necessarily, I guess, get tested. I think they have some testing requirements that are much less frequent, but I thought as again, those are already being done, and so we don't need to kind of duplicate that. And then the second one was, some communities have passed ordinances on property value guarantees. Those ordinances have not been challenged yet, to my knowledge. I don't know, David, if you've heard of any that have been. I think it, again, when we went through kind of our coordination and I coordinated with David, that the legality of that is probably, hard. He's giving us, I was trying to be a little more soft on it, but harder to, might not pass the test when a judge comes to it. And so, yeah, that was the concern is, I don't know if we have a legal basis to even do that, it sounded like. So, those did not get included.
What, to say that it would devalue someone's property?
So, you did mention Spencer County, and that is one that has put that in there. I believe, I think it was Spencer, I've seen it in one. Anyway, and basically it says that they have to do basically an appraisal before it goes in, they have to do an appraisal after, and if it goes down, they have to pay them the difference.
It's kind of redundant because on a special exception, one of the things that the applicant is supposed to convince the board for approval is that it won't damage values. It's not detrimental to me.
Right.
Basically saying, and then if it does, they have to pay them the difference, but I think it was, again, defaulting to the attorney saying, the legal
Right, then you gotta
ability to
prove
do
that
that.
there was development and no other factors that devalue your home.
Correct, like the market or
Good
anything.
luck, right?
That was, I think, kind of the concern with that one. And hopefully BZA's, well, not hopefully, BZA will be considering that in the, crystal ball, like aspect of that. But at least when you know, those were things that were discussed, but not necessarily put on the sheet, but it's good. Alright, well, I will draft those, and then we will do public notice and have a public hearing at the next planning commission meeting will be the plan, which means you guys look at these, at least 10 days prior, since that's when they will be available for public hearing. Awesome, thanks guys.
Thank you.
If you have any others between now and then that you've noticed too, shoot them over to me and I can at least include them so we can move on.
All right, Stacy.
Kathy has it.
Okay.
No, just talking about the number 8.
The fee
Oh.
schedule,
Yeah, we're just gonna add a mini split to our new citizen serve fee. So it'll be $100 for an applicant to pull a mini split permit.
So I think that fee schedule has to be published in the
Yeah, it
paper.
does.
Okay.
Can you update them on the
Our
merger?
subdivision.
Oh, do I?
Update them on the merger and how it's going?
Yeah, Jason and I, we've been working on it, we meet with them every Monday. We get, everything over to Nestor now that they want, and everything's moving along pretty good.
good.
So hopefully by, August, September maybe, we should be going live with them.
Yeah.
And, get rid of GL,
Seem to be working better than the prior.
yeah.
Good.
Everything's,
Because
we haven't
they
used it
start.
yet, we've just been, little test permits and, yeah, building it. But, right now, everything's, it's going pretty good.
I have one follow-up on that. If you're going to amend the fee schedule, we can do it as a public hearing next time and do one label, like add that includes all of that stuff if you want to amend that. Is that good? Okay, so let's coordinate. And David, I'll send you that public notice language before, so you can, let's just coordinate on that then.
Okay.
Okay, and then total permits issued for January?
I've got 24 residential permits for January for a total of 6,157,000.
Is there any other questions, or did you have a question?
No, I'm just trying to put that number in my head. 24 permits equals 6 million. Is that commercial?
Total construction cost
Oh, okay.
altogether for 24
Okay.
residential permits,
Okay.
6,157,371.
For the month.
I'm thinking permit cost.
Oh.
That's okay. I'm
We're
like, wow, the fees are
expensive.
really-
Value of the home.
Working good.
All right, does anyone have anything else? Do you have a motion to adjourn?
Cost your house is not your birthday.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, I have a motion second to adjourn. All in favor, signify by saying aye. All opposed, motion carries.
I think we're like.